What's up, y'all? It's Celeste. It's now been a year since I switched to sitting at a floor desk instead of my old IKEA kind of office desk, computer desk that I had been sitting at for a long time. And so I wanted to do a little update about how it's been going and whether I still like it, which, obviously by the fact that I'm still doing it, probably kind of gives you an indication that I do. But I wanted to give a little bit more detail than that. So if you haven't watched my original video where I talked about that I had just switched to it. I think I had maybe been doing it for like a month or so when I made that video last year. And if you haven't seen that, you can click up above and watch it. One of the most common comments that I've gotten on that video is actually a question that people are asking where I got the floor desk. And it's not actually a floor desk. It's a coffee table that I bought at a thrift store probably 16 years ago maybe and repainted. It's just like a regular coffee table. And so there's nothing special about it. It's just literally a coffee table with a table. I don't know if you can actually see this in the video, but this is like a shoe shelf kind of thing that you put in your closet. There's one of those behind it, which actually has my monitor on top of it, and then on the shelf in between it has my actual computer and like some other like USB hubs and like all that kind of stuff. So it works pretty well. The only problem with it is it's not the exact perfect height for me, I don't think, but it's been okay. I haven't really noticed any major like ergonomic problems with the height. But if you are looking to do this, you can really just use any kind of table. What I would recommend is maybe getting some things around your house, like any kind of, plastic boxes or even cardboard boxes, or like, anything that you can stack, books, anything that you can really stack, and maybe put whatever you're going to be using on it, like either your keyboard or laptop or whatever it is that you're going to be doing at the desk, and just kind of sit on the floor and maybe also sit on like a cushion or two to see like how it feels at different heights. And then that can give you an idea of what kind of height you actually would want for your floor desk. And then you can pretty much use anything. Like I said, it could be a coffee table. It could be, you could make something out of, you could make something from scratch, but you could also like, put some kind of shelf or platform or something on something else, or, anything. You can pretty much like be creative here. So I'm sorry to disappoint anybody that I can't just tell you like, go to Amazon and buy this product and it'll be perfect. But, this is actually kind of better because you can pretty much do whatever you want and just find what works for you and what feels comfortable for you. So as I mentioned in my first video on this topic, one of the reasons that I wanted to switch to a floor desk is because sitting in a chair, it's not that sitting in a chair itself is like evil or anything. It's just that we spend so much of our lives in that exact position because, you're in a chair at a desk, you're in a chair at your kitchen table, you're in a chair basically in a car. Most of the things that we do when you go pretty much anywhere and have to wait for anything, there are, chairs in a waiting room or a lobby or whatever. So pretty much everywhere we go, we sit in a chair and we're in this essentially the same position all the time. You can adjust around like I showed in my first video. I actually, even when I did that, when I sat at a regular desk, I changed position in my chair like all the time. But essentially like the main parts of your body are in the same configuration, which is like your back, and then your hips are bent in this kind of 90-degree-ish angle, and then your knees are bent in another 90-degree angle, and there's not really, and then your feet are also bent in another 90-degree. Everything is 90-degree angles, which is not how our bodies are meant to move. Like, they're meant to be in that position at some times, but not all the time. It kind of orients us very forward, which, aside from kind of the like neurological impact of that, which there actually are some, our muscles and like flexibility and mobility of our joints don't get to use their full range of motion. So we're always like in this forward position. So like the way that I'm sitting now, my knees are not forward. If I were sitting in a chair, sitting like this, my knees are forward. Yeah, I can do things like this, and I did, but most of the time your knees are like this. Your hips are like this. Your hips are not like this. They're not like this. All these different positions that our joints are meant to be in they just don't get to be in very often. So anyway, I wanted to switch to a floor desk just to give myself a little bit more variability during the day in terms of the positions that I could be in comfortably and easily. And also just the act of getting up and down off the floor over and over again is pretty good for you. Because again, sitting in chairs, you don't, like, aside from the position that you're in the chair itself, when you get in and out of a chair, you aren't actually going down very far. You're basically, bending the joints that I mentioned, part way so that you land in the chair, but that's basically it. You don't get all the way up and down off the floor, which is much more range of motion for all your joints and muscles. So those are the main reasons that I wanted to switch. If you've been following some of my other videos and my Instagram and things like that, then I've been dealing with a lot of chronic pain over the last, kind of a long time, but especially like over the last couple years. And lest anyone think that sitting on the floor has actually made it worse, I actually feel like I've gained a lot of not just mobility and flexibility, but like fluidity, I guess, in my body. Like a lot of areas of my body don't feel as stuck as they used to. And I've also been doing some different kinds of like body work, like working with a physical therapist and an osteopath and stuff like that. And like some of what they've done has obviously helped as well, but like they have also observed that in me. So I feel like if sitting on the floor were actually making it worse, like it would be more apparent to myself and them, and it's definitely not. It's actually a lot of things have actually gotten a lot better, even though I still have pain. It's a little bit hard to kind of narrow down exactly like what variables have affected things, because I have changed a lot of stuff over the last year. I, have done a lot more different kinds of movement and a lot more kind of stretching and mobility work and stuff like that. Again, I've also been like going to professionals and getting some help with things, and also switching to barefoot shoes and just doing a lot of like transitional stuff that has both helped me and also has had kind of like growing pains along with it, like literally, like no pun intended, but like actual pains, not necessarily from those things, but just from having to get used to a different way of doing stuff. It's like anything else with the body and really a lot of things in life. It takes some struggle kind of at the beginning to get used to doing things a different way, just because, especially with your body, like if your body is used to doing things in a certain way, again, you don't have the strength, you don't have the like neurological pathways that are used to doing it that way. So it does feel like a struggle at first, and there can be pain along the way because you are having to build new muscle, you're having to, loosen things up that aren't used to being loose, and just, a lot of things like that. So having some pain is not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something wrong. I think that sitting on the floor and being able, especially to have my hips open a little bit more, not just sitting like this, because I did sit like this in the chair, but having like being able to sit like this and, having one leg out like this. Like I couldn't do that in a chair because I couldn't have my leg out or even have, this leg this way, because there wouldn't be anywhere to put it. It would just fall. So there are certain positions that I just was not able to sit in a chair in. And I think being able to do that has kind of helped open my hips up a little bit more. I still have a lot of hip tightness, but it's gotten a lot better over the last year. Not just because of this, again, other things too, but I feel like this has at least helped, if not, been a major factor in it. There are a couple things about it that are still not 100% ideal for me. One being that even though I can be in a lot of different positions, I still tend toward one, which is sitting on my knees, which I know a lot of people think of as a really uncomfortable position, but it's a position that I have spent a lot of time in over my lifetime. I actually, in 6th grade, got, at the end of the year, the Sitting on Her Feet award. Ignore the pronouns, obviously, but because I was always sitting on my feet and basically would just sit in my desk at school like this, like all the time. And I did that like through pretty much all of elementary school, most of middle school, probably a lot of high school. Starting like when I was little, it probably was because I was little, and I don't just mean that I was a child, I mean I was actually like undersized for my age. So I was very short, and so like sitting at a desk in order to like comfortably reach everything. It was easier for me, and also to see over people in front of me if there was anybody in front of me. Like, I actually had to sit up on my knees in order to see things and do things. So I got used to it, and I just kind of never stopped, which is great because that's a good way to, again, use your joints more than a lot of people do. But because it is kind of my go-to position a lot of the time, especially when I'm sitting on the floor, I tend to spend a lot of time in it. And I'm still finding myself kind of defaulting to that, which is okay. It's not that bad. But I do want to spend more time in other positions. But I realize at different points during the day, like, wow, I've been spending a lot of time in that position. It's not uncomfortable. It's not like I'm spending a lot of time in it and then I feel like crampy from it or anything. It's just that again, one of my goals is to be in more positions, so that's something that I'm still working on. The other thing, which is kind of ties into that, is that the specific orientation of like sitting at a desk and using a computer, or even like writing or something, kind of makes it a little bit harder to be in a lot of different positions, at least for me, at least with the way my setup is, because for one thing, the actual desk or like coffee table that I'm using, there's not a lot of room underneath it to be in a lot of different positions, whereas sitting on the floor here, I can do this, and all this stuff, and I can't really do that very easily at the computer. I can sit like this, but I can't get very close, so it's kind of hard to type, and it's like that with some other positions too. Like, it's either that I can't be close enough to the monitor to see it very well, or I can't reach the keyboard very well or the mouse. So those are kind of the main constraints that I'm dealing with. With that, if I were not using a computer, if I were just like sitting on the floor, it would be a lot easier. Also, maybe if I had a laptop, it would be easier, because I've seen other people use laptops where they're, more easily able to move the laptop around and put something under it so it could be at different heights, and I can't really do that with mine very easily. So that's another thing that I'm still trying to figure out a little bit. But for the most part, I feel pretty happy with how it's been going and how comfortable I am. I definitely find it more comfortable than sitting in a chair at this point, especially a kind of hard chair. They're just not comfortable to me. I would just much rather sit on the floor where I can be, on something soft and just, be able to move around more. And speaking of feeling comfortable, one of the other questions that I have gotten recently is, and I've gotten kind of variations of this throughout, people are wanting to know how they can sit on the floor and feel comfortable. They say that when they sit on the floor, their back hurts, or they feel uncomfortable, they just can't do it. So there are a couple of things to address here. One is, if you're not used to sitting on the floor, it's going to feel uncomfortable just because you're not used to it. Your body is not used to being in that position. Your bones and muscles are not used to, being in this configuration and holding your body up, which is, a decent amount of weight that it's having to work against gravity to hold up. And when you have been sitting in a certain position for a really long time, or at least like a certain general position, like sitting in a chair, your body has gotten used to holding you up in that position, maybe not in the best way. You're probably compensating in some way, or creating like tension from doing that. But you have gotten to the point where you don't really think about it. You just sit down and, your body holds itself up, at least, to a certain degree. But especially with chairs that have backs, you can just kind of lean against them and you don't actually have to hold yourself up very much. That's one of the problems with chairs, is that, it's nice, you don't have to do as much work, but the problem is then your muscles don't actually, get the strength or the kind of like neuromuscular, like, understanding of how to hold themselves that way. They're just not used to it. So the more you sit on the floor, the more you'll get used to it. And it's not necessarily like a magic thing that you just start sitting on the floor and like magically you have all the right, strength and everything. There are a couple things that you want to think about. So this is one of the other things to address with this question. Posture is really important. And by posture, I don't just mean like sitting up as straight as you can. It's more about kind of finding an alignment and maybe figuring out what it is you're doing when you're sitting that hurts your back or wherever it is that's hurting. Kind of maybe adjust a little bit in different ways and see what whatever you're doing, like if you move a certain way, does that make the pain feel worse? Does it make you feel better? Do you feel relief? All these things can kind of give you an idea of what it is you need to adjust. And I can't really tell you specifically because I don't know exactly where it is you're hurting or in what way you're hurting or how you're sitting or anything like that. But just to kind of give you some maybe general things to think about. So let's say you're sitting kind of cross-legged like this. It can be really easy for you to kind of, especially if you sit there for a long time and kind of stop paying attention to what you're doing, kind of end up curving your back like this, where you're kind of tucking your hips underneath yourself, tucking your tailbone under, and kind of sitting on your tailbone, and also kind of curving your spine like this, and hunching your shoulders forward like this. This is a little bit exaggerated, but not necessarily. It kind of depends on the person. And a lot of times, especially if you are doing something in front of you, like using a computer or watching TV or something, you end up kind of like leaning your head forward like this, where your head is coming forward on your neck. And none of these things are really great. Again, they're not inherently bad. It's just that you are putting a lot of strain on different parts of your body, like your spine, and the more forward your head is on your spine, the more heavy it is, essentially. Like, obviously, the actual weight of your head doesn't change, but relative, like the amount of work that your spine has to do to hold your head up, and like the amount of work that your muscles have to do to hold your head up, the further forward it goes, the heavier it feels. It's like, you know, if you held something, let's say you held like a pole or something upright, it's not going to feel that heavy. The further out you put it, it's going to feel a lot harder to hold up. That's the same principle. So the further forward your head is, the more uncomfortable it's going to be. You might not feel it right away, but you're going to end up with a lot of tension in your neck and possibly your upper back, maybe even other parts of your back. So you want to avoid that. And I admit that I still do this sometimes, especially like I will sit at the computer and I'll end up like putting my elbow up and like sitting like this. I try to kind of remember to pull my head back, and you don't want to pull your head back like that. You don't want to just like do this. What you want to do is actually kind of ramp your head back. So you want to kind of go like this. So you're not pulling it back like this. You're just kind of sliding your head back like that. Hopefully that makes sense. And the other thing, when you're kind of hunching your shoulders forward, like that pulls everything forward, it tightens your chest, it puts a lot of strain on your back, and your spine. Again, it's not bad to bend your spine, but you are putting a lot of tension on your back, and you're just making it harder for things to be held up because your spine is in a certain orientation for a certain reason. Like, to hold yourself up, it wants to be in a certain curvature, and when you start curving that curvature the wrong way, not wrong way, but like a suboptimal way, let's say, for holding up that amount of weight, then again, you're just like making things harder because you're bending forward. That's more weight that it's having to hold out in front of it, essentially, instead of just like stacking it on top of each other. So again, none of this is like, it's not like there's a certain position you have to get in and stay in that. That's actually what you're trying not to do by not sitting in a chair. What you want to do is move around as much as possible. And that means not necessarily just the whole, kind of macro position you're in, different things like this, but also the little micro adjustments that you can make. If you find yourself kind of slumping forward, then you don't have to make a huge movement. You can just kind of straighten yourself up a little bit. Just try to kind of be aware of it, and the more you do this, the more you'll get used to kind of checking in with yourself throughout the day, and just like, you can even, at first, if you want to do this, or forever, if you want to do this, you could set a timer. You can use an app or an actual timer or whatever, and just try to like remind yourself to check in, like, is my neck forward? Am I slumping my shoulders forward? Am I tucking my hips under? And whatever it is that you feel like you're doing, just kind of get more aware of that, and don't get down on yourself if you find yourself doing it. Just kind of readjust and just try to kind of keep a little bit more aware of it. The more you do that, the less aware of it you'll have to be. It'll just kind of happen. And I definitely am not perfect at this yet. Like you probably have noticed in this video, I'm still doing this a lot because it's still something I'm working on because it takes a while. But I feel like I've gotten a lot better at it, and I feel like I've gotten better at not just getting in a position kind of mindlessly and just staying there and like not paying attention to it, and then it feels a lot worse later. Whereas if you check in with yourself and you find yourself in this position, like maybe I've been in this position for a few minutes, but like now I fix it, and then that kind of resets things. Basically just check in with yourself. Again, it helps if you kind of start out trying to be aware of the different movements, like just experiment with it. If you feel like you're sitting like this and you start feeling uncomfortable, you could maybe change one thing at a time, see if maybe you feel a little bit relief from doing this. Another thing you can do is actually get something put under your hips. This is especially good for that tucking thing, because the problem with tucking your hips under, well, there are several problems with it, but your weight is not really supposed to be on your tailbone like this. It should be on the bones underneath here, the very bottom of your pelvis, which are sometimes called sit bones. Those are actually like where the weight should be. So if you have a hard time sitting like this and sitting up straight like this, and by straight, again, I don't mean like rigid, I just mean not, slumping over. You can put something underneath yourself to kind of facilitate this pelvic tilt a little bit. You don't want to be hyperextended like this, but you also don't want to be tucked under. And especially if you're used to sitting in chairs with backs, we tend to do this because that's how we get our back to the back of the chair, because a lot of chairs, especially with sloped backs, you kind of have to do that in order to get your back to the back of the chair. So if you're used to sitting like this, it's going to be kind of your default position that your body is used to being in. And so it can help to actually put something underneath yourself, which I'll show you. You can use, I'm just going to use this bolster here, but you can use any kind of cushion or even a book or a hoodie or something, like anything you want to put underneath yourself. This is a little bit higher than I would sit at my computer just because of the height of everything. But if you wanted to sit on something like this, that's fine. Just like make sure that whatever you're sitting in front of is in a height that's, in accordance with that. But just being able to have your legs kind of going below your hips makes it easier to be in this position. If you are having to have your hips up, like when you're on the floor, your legs are having to come out of the hip joint at a different angle, and that kind of makes it a little bit harder to get yourself to sit up on these bones underneath here. Sitting up here just makes it a little bit easier to kind of lean forward a little bit and get this kind of angle going with your pelvis. And of course you can use something like this for part of the time and not use it for another part of the time, or use this and use a shorter cushion for some of the time, or add a cushion on top of this. You can really change this however often you want. Maybe sometimes you feel more comfortable having it one way and sometimes another way. So just try to keep things kind of dynamic and experiment with it and just see what feels comfortable. And again, you're not looking for that perfect one position that you want to be in all the time. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to get your body used to being in more positions more comfortably so that it can strengthen the muscles that need to be strengthened, and also neurologically get used to being in different positions and easily getting in those positions. Another thing you might want to look at if you're having a lot of pain when you're sitting on the floor is actually strengthening some of your core muscles outside of just the sitting. So core muscles, I don't just mean doing sit-ups for your six-pack kind of abs. I'm talking about your entire core. So that's pretty much your whole trunk, your back and your sides, your front. Everything here, the stronger it is and the more stability you have there, the easier it's going to be to hold yourself up. This is something I'm very much still working on myself, but I do feel like doing core specific exercises has helped me kind of feel less like I'm having to work to hold myself up. And one final thing you might want to look at is there are different kinds of practices that help you get more in tune with your body. And when I say that, it sounds a little bit kind of like new agey, but I mean like actually like mentally and neurologically get better sense of the different parts of your body, where they are in space, what it feels like when they are in different orientations. One of the best things that I've found for this is Feldenkrais, and I will put some links in the description about that if you want to look that up. There are some other things, of course, like yoga and Tai Chi and things like that that aren't necessarily designed to do this, but can help you with that. And yeah, just different like somatic practices. If you look up pretty much like any kind of somatic sensory work, that would probably point you in the right direction. So I would say it's been a success and definitely something that I intend to continue. So if there's anything else that you wanted to know about this, if you have any other questions or comments or thoughts on it, then please leave them in the comments below and I will be happy to answer them there and or make another future video where I can talk a little bit more about it. I hope this has been helpful for the folks who have asked the previous questions and maybe giving you some other ideas of things to experiment with if you're trying this. And yeah, I think that's about it. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more of my future content. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.